The edge of extinction. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Coalition's flagship, Eternal Dawn, had never been so silent. Admiral Keshra of the Valorian species stood at the center of the holographic star map, her scaled fingers trembling slightly as she gestured at the expanding red zones that represented territory lost to the Scourge. The dark red stain had consumed nearly a third of Coalition space in just 18 standard months. "The Purgus system fell yesterday," she said, her voice carrying the weariness of too many defeats. 3 billion souls. The evacuation ships managed to rescue less than 10% before the Scourge overwhelmed the orbital defenses. The 22 representatives of the Coalition species sat in stunned silence. The Purgus system had been considered a fortress, with 17 battle stations and a defensive fleet of over 200 vessels. High Minister Loreth of the Centauri leaned forward, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of extreme distress among his kind. "How many ships did we lose?" "All of them," Admiral Keshra replied flatly. "The Scourge adapted to our phase shield technology. They simply passed through them, as if they weren't there." Science Director Vrel, a Kinte whose translucent skin revealed the rapid pulsing of his 3 hearts, pulled up additional data on his personal console. The Scourge are evolving faster than ever. Each engagement accelerates their adaptation cycle by approximately 7%. "They're learning from us, Admiral. Learning and improving. Then we must stop engaging them," suggested Ambassador Prelna, her delicate avian features arranged in an expression of calculated diplomacy, perhaps negotiation. "There is nothing to negotiate with," roared General Kaztur, the massive Brecken warrior slamming his armored fist onto the table hard enough to crack its surface. "The Scourge does not communicate. It does not bargain. It consumes. It adapts. It moves on. There is no reasoning with a plague." The Scourge had appeared from the void between galaxies 2 years earlier, a collective intelligence controlling billions of biomechanical organisms that functioned as a single entity. It didn't want territory or resources or power. It wanted to consume all organic life and incorporate it into itself. Its tactics evolved with each encounter, learning from its enemies before destroying them. "The simulation projections are conclusive," said Science Director Vrel, his voice barely above a whisper. "At current rates of adaptation and expansion, the Scourge will reach the Coalition core worlds within 74 standard days. Total extinction of all Coalition species is projected at 97% probability within 1 standard year." The silence that followed was heavier than a neutron star. 22 civilizations, some with histories stretching back millions of years, facing extinction within months. "Then we die with honor," declared General Kaztur, straightening to his full 3-meter height. "We gather every vessel, every warrior, and we strike at the heart of the Scourge. We may fall, but we will be remembered as those who faced the end with courage." Admiral Keshra was about to respond when her communication implant pulsed. She frowned, touching the scale just behind her ear crest. "This is not the time for—" She stopped suddenly, her golden eyes widening. "Repeat that, Commander." The council members watched as the Admiral's expression shifted from irritation to surprise to cautious interest. "Bring them in," she finally said, lowering her hand. "Council members, we have unexpected visitors. A ship of unknown design has entered Coalition space and is requesting an audience. They claim to represent a species called humans from a planet called Earth." "Another species," High Minister Loreth scoffed. "Now, when we face extinction, what possible difference could one more doomed race make?" "They say they've been monitoring our war with the Scourge," Admiral Keshra continued. "They say they want to help." "Help?" General Kaztur laughed without humor. "What could some unknown species offer that 17 of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy cannot?" The doors to the council chamber slid open, and 5 figures entered. They were bipedal, covered in some kind of dark, form-fitting material. Their skin tones varied from pale beige to deep brown, with patches of facial hair on some. They walked with a predatory grace that made even the warrior Brecken straighten slightly. The leader stepped forward, shorter than the others, female by appearance, with close-cropped black hair and eyes that seemed to evaluate the entire room in seconds. "I am Captain Maya Chen of the Earth Expeditionary Force," she said in perfect galactic standard, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. "We understand you have a war to win." Admiral Keshara studied the human carefully. "How do you know our language?" "We've been intercepting your transmissions for months," Captain Chen replied matter-of-factly. "We learn quickly." "Why would you help us?" asked Ambassador Prelna, her diplomatic training unable to hide her suspicion. "What do you gain?" The human smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. "Earth is just one planet, far from here. We're new to interstellar travel. If there's one thing humans understand, it's that a neighborhood is only as safe as its neighbors. You believe you can defeat an enemy that has brought 17 advanced civilizations to the brink of extinction?" Science Director Vrel asked incredulously. "Your scourge has a fundamental weakness," said one of the other humans, a tall, broad-shouldered male with dark skin and intense eyes. "You just haven't found it yet." "And what might that be, human?" General Castor demanded. "The scourge is a collective," Captain Chen explained. "It thinks as one entity. It evolves through consistent patterns. It's predictable in its unpredictability." She paused. "Humans are not collective. We are chaos." Admiral Keshara gestured to the star map. "The scourge has destroyed thousands of our ships, consumed dozens of worlds. What do you bring that could possibly change this war?" "Perspective," Chen replied simply. "You've been fighting the scourge like civilized beings. Rules of engagement, tactical doctrines, strategic withdrawals." Her expression hardened. "Humans don't fight wars to maintain civilization. We fight to survive, by any means necessary." "Bold words," General Castor rumbled. "Can you back them with action?" Captain Chen exchanged glances with her team. "My ship carries 20 humans. Give us command of one of your combat units, and we'll show you what we can do." The council erupted in protests. "Give command to unknown aliens. Preposterous. Too risky. Inappropriate." Silence. Admiral Keshra's voice cut through the commotion. She turned to Captain Chen. "We have a combat simulation facility. It recreates actual battles with the scourge with perfect accuracy. Would you be willing to demonstrate your capabilities there?" "Gladly," Chen replied with the same unnervingly calm smile. 2 hours later, the entire council stood in the observation chamber overlooking the massive simulation arena. Below, Captain Chen and her 4 companions faced a simulated scourge swarm, the same scenario that had decimated an elite coalition force on Purgus Prime. This simulation is calibrated to the scourge's most recent tactical and biological adaptations, Science Director Vrel explained. "Our best unit lasted 7 minutes and 12 seconds before being overwhelmed." "Begin simulation," Admiral Keshra ordered. What followed left the council members speechless. The humans didn't move as a coordinated unit like coalition forces. They scattered, each seemingly fighting their own battle, yet somehow aware of the others. They used the environment in ways no coalition tactician had considered, collapsing structures onto swarms, creating choke points, setting traps. Most shocking was their adaptability. When the scourge evolved mid-battle, as they always did, the humans changed tactics instantly, sometimes even anticipating the adaptations before they occurred. 17 minutes later, the simulation ended. All scourge units eliminated. 2 humans had simulated injuries, but none were fatally wounded. "Impossible," whispered Science Director Vrel. "They shouldn't have been able to predict the 3rd phase adaptation. We've never seen it before this simulation." Captain Chen and her team returned to the observation chamber. The woman wasn't even breathing hard. "How did you know?" Admiral Keshra demanded. "How did you predict what the scourge would do?" "We didn't," Chen replied. "But we've spent our entire evolutionary history trying to kill each other. We've had thousands of years to perfect the art of warfare against intelligent, adaptive enemies ourselves. You fought without formation, without unified tactics, General Castor observed, his voice both critical and curious. Controlled chaos, replied the tall human male. The scourge is used to fighting ordered, logical opponents. You give it patterns to learn from. Humans are pattern breakers by nature. Admiral Keshra looked at the other council members, seeing the first flickers of something long absent. Hope. I have a battle group preparing for a last-stand defense of the Araxis system, she said slowly. If what you've demonstrated is reproducible in actual combat. It is, Captain Chen assured her. And we have more to offer. The ship that brought us is just a scout. We have 3,000 of our best soldiers in a carrier vessel awaiting your permission to enter Coalition space. Specialists in exactly this kind of warfare. Only 3,000. High Minister Lorath asked dubiously. The scourge numbers in the billions. For the first time, Captain Chen's smile reached her eyes, and somehow that was more disturbing than her previous expressions. Minister, humans don't win wars by outnumbering our enemies, she said quietly. We win by making them wish they'd never encountered our species in the first place. A chill ran through the council chamber. Admiral Keshra studied these strange aliens carefully. There was something primal about them, something that stirred ancient instincts of caution in her reptilian hindbrain. But the Coalition had run out of options. The Araxis defense launches in 30 hours, she said finally. Your soldiers may join us, Captain Chen. Show us if humanity's reputation is deserved. We will, Chen replied, her eyes flickering to the simulation results still displayed on the screens. And Admiral, you might want to prepare your people. The way humans fight war, it's not pretty. As the humans left to prepare, Ambassador Prelna moved close to Admiral Keshra. Are we certain this is wise? She whispered. There's something about them that feels dangerous. Admiral Keshra watched the humans depart, noting their predatory grace once more. We face extinction, Ambassador. At this point, I'm more concerned with survival than wisdom. She turned back to the star map, where the red stain of the scourge continued its relentless expansion. Send word to all remaining Coalition forces, she ordered. Operation Araxis will proceed with human advisors. For the first time in months, Admiral Keshra allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. If these humans were even half as effective as they claimed, perhaps extinction wasn't as certain as they'd feared. But as she recalled the cold efficiency with which the humans had dismantled the scourge in the simulation, she wondered if they were merely trading one extinction for another. The human way of war. The Coalition Command Center aboard the flagship Eternal Dawn had been transformed in less than 24 hours. Gone were the orderly holographic displays and the neat rows of control stations. In their place stood a chaotic array of improvised tactical interfaces, physical maps, and what the humans called analog backups. Admiral Keshra entered to find Captain Chen and her team working alongside Coalition officers, though alongside might have been generous. The humans had effectively taken over. What is the meaning of this? The Admiral demanded, gesturing at the transformed command center. Captain Chen straightened from where she had been marking a physical star chart with red symbols. Redundancy, Admiral. Your systems are too integrated, too dependent on quantum networks. The scourge has shown it can infiltrate your communications. We're creating systems it can't easily compromise. Primitive systems, muttered Science Director Vrel, who had followed the Admiral into the command center. Effective systems, corrected the human communications specialist. Rise, if the Admiral remembered correctly. Sometimes the old ways are best. The scourge can't hack paper. Before the Admiral could respond, the doors slid open again to admit General Castor. The massive Brecken warrior was followed by 3 humans the Admiral hadn't seen before, 2 males and a female, wearing different uniforms than Captain Chen's team. Admiral, the General rumbled, the human reinforcements have arrived. 3 vessels, as promised. This is Commander Sarah Blackwood of there. What did you call it? Special Tactical Response Unit, the woman replied. She was shorter than Captain Chen, with pale skin and hair the color of coalition gold. But her eyes held the same predatory calculation that seemed common to all humans. My team specializes in asymmetric warfare. What exactly does that mean? Admiral Keshra asked. Commander Blackwood smiled thinly. It means we're very good at defeating enemies who are more numerous and technically superior. Your coalition forces are excellent at conventional warfare, added one of the males with Blackwood, a compact, muscular human with facial hair. But conventional tactics aren't working against the Scourge. We're here to introduce some unconventional options. Major Jackson Lee, the man introduced himself. Biological warfare specialist. The third human, tall and lean with sharp features, simply nodded. Colonel Dmitry Volkov. Psychological operations. Admiral Keshra felt a chill run through her scales. These designations, biological warfare, psychological operations, they carried ominous implications. Our coalition conventions prohibit biological weapons, Science Director Vrel said stiffly, and psychological warfare is considered unethical against sentient beings. Colonel Volkov raised an eyebrow. Is the Scourge showing you ethical considerations, Director? Are they adhering to your conventions while they consume your worlds? That's not the point, the Kintai scientists sputtered. We have principles. Principles are a luxury of the victorious, Captain Chen interrupted. Right now, you're losing. Badly. Admiral Keshra raised a hand, silencing further objections. What do you propose, Commander Blackwood? The human officer stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the Araxis system. The Scourge follows patterns. Complex, evolving patterns, but patterns nonetheless. We've analyzed your battle data and identified recurring tactical behaviors. Impossible, Science Director Vrel objected. We've had our best analysts working on this for months. The Scourge adaptation cycles are too unpredictable. Your analysts are looking for logical progressions, Major Lai explained. We looked for psychological ones. The Scourge doesn't have psychology, General Castor growled. It's a hive mind. Everything that thinks has psychology, Colonel Volkov countered. Even collective intelligences. The Scourge is intelligent, which means it has motivations, preferences, aversions. These create exploitable patterns. Commander Blackwood manipulated the hologram, highlighting key points in the Araxis system. Here's what we're going to do. Your original plan was to position your fleet in standard defensive formation around these Lagrange points, correct? Admiral Keshra nodded reluctantly. We're going to do the opposite, Blackwood continued. We'll position the bulk of the fleet here, at this seemingly vulnerable position. We'll make it look like a tactical error. That's because it would be a tactical error, General Castor objected. The Scourge would surround and annihilate our forces. Exactly, Captain Chen said with that disturbing smile. They'll think they've caught us making a mistake. They'll commit to the attack pattern they've used successfully before, and that's when we spring the trap. Over the next hour, the humans outlined a battle plan unlike anything the Coalition had ever considered. It involved deliberate sacrifices, feigned retreats, and concentrated strikes at targets the Coalition had previously considered secondary. Most disturbing to the Coalition officers was the humans' casual acceptance of casualties as part of the strategy. You're proposing to sacrifice the 7th Fleet as a decoy? Admiral Keshra asked incredulously. Not sacrifice, Commander Blackwood corrected. Use as bait. There's a difference. The 7th Fleet will appear vulnerable, drawing in the Scourge's primary force. Meanwhile, the real attack will come from here and here. She pointed to positions that seemed illogically dispersed. This violates every principle of unified fleet action, General Castor protested. Good, said Major Lai. If your principles were working, you wouldn't need us. As the planning session continued, more Coalition officers arrived, bringing reports of the human soldiers now boarding Coalition vessels. The reports were mixed. The humans were disciplined and skilled, but their methods were causing friction. They're reconfiguring our weapon systems without authorization, complained a Centauri tactical officer. They've disabled safety protocols on the phase cannons to increase power output by 30%. Those protocols exist to prevent catastrophic overloads, Science Director Vrel pointed out. The humans say the improved firepower is worth the risk, the officer replied uneasily. Admiral Keshara was about to respond when another officer, a Valorian like herself, approached with an even more disturbing report. Admiral, the human specialists have requested access to our biological research facilities. They want to study scourge tissue samples. All eyes turned to Major Lai, who shrugged unapologetically. We need to understand their biology, to exploit its weaknesses. And what exactly do you plan to do with this understanding? Science Director Vrel demanded. Whatever it takes to win, Lai replied simply. The tension in the command center was palpable. Coalition officers exchanged uncomfortable glances, while the humans continued their work with methodical efficiency. Admiral Keshara took Captain Chen aside. Your methods are causing concern among my people, Captain. That's to be expected, Chen replied. Your species have enjoyed millennia of relative peace. The coalition was founded on principles of cooperation and mutual advancement. War was ritualized, limited by conventions and rules. And humans, what principles founded your society? Chen's expression grew distant. Survival, Admiral. Humans clawed our way up from being prey animals to apex predators. We spent thousands of years fighting each other for resources, territory, ideology, religion, sometimes just for the sake of fighting. We're very, very good at war because we've had more practice than any species should. That's not something to be proud of, Admiral Keshara observed. No, Chen agreed surprisingly. It's not. But right now, it's exactly what you need. Before the Admiral could respond, alarms blared throughout the command center. A Brecken communications officer turned from his station, his expression grim. Admiral, Scourge Vanguard forces have entered the Araxis system. Earlier than predicted, they've already engaged our outer sensor arrays. General Castor moved to the tactical display. How many? At least 300 vessels in the first wave, more detecting every minute. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Coalition officers rushed to stations, preparing for the standard response protocols. But Captain Chen's voice cut through the commotion. Belay those orders, she commanded with surprising authority. Follow the plan. 7th Fleet to fallback position Omega. Strike groups 3 and 4 maintain communications blackout until my signal. Admiral Keshara hesitated only briefly before nodding to her officers. Do as she says. As the coalition forces scrambled to implement the unfamiliar tactics, Commander Blackwood approached the Admiral. Time to see if you can stomach the human way of war. Admiral, the battle that followed would forever change the coalition's understanding of warfare. The 7th Fleet retreated precisely as planned, appearing to abandon crucial defensive positions. The Scourge, predictably, surged forward to exploit the apparent weakness, but instead of finding vulnerable targets, they encountered a carefully orchestrated trap. Coalition ships emerged from hiding places within the system's asteroid belt and dense nebula clouds, attacking from vectors the Scourge had not protected against. Most shocking to the coalition observers was the humans' use of civilian vessels, retrofitted with minimal weapons, as suicide drones against key Scourge command ships. The tactic was brutally effective. The Scourge, accustomed to coalition forces protecting non-combatants at all costs, had no defense against vessels that appeared harmless until the moment of impact. Those transports had volunteer crews, Captain Chen explained when she saw Admiral Keshara's expression. No one was ordered to sacrifice themselves. They chose to. Throughout the battle, human tactical officers coordinated coalition forces in constantly shifting patterns, never establishing a recognizable formation long enough for the Scourge to adapt. When the Scourge adjusted to one approach, the humans were already shifting to another. 6 hours into the engagement, Major Lai approached the command center with news. "We've identified a potential vulnerability in the scourge biology," he reported. "Their neural pathways use a specific protein complex to transmit collective directives. We may be able to disrupt it." "How?" Science Director Vrell asked, professional curiosity momentarily overriding his ethical concerns. "A targeted bioweapon," Lai explained, "delivered via modified radiation torpedoes into the heart of their fleet formations. It won't kill them outright, but it should disrupt their coordination temporarily." Admiral Keshra saw several of her officers flinch at the casual mention of bioweapons. "This crosses a line we've never crossed, Major." "With respect, Admiral," Lai replied evenly. "The scourge crossed that line the moment they started consuming your people. This isn't about fighting fairly. It's about survival." After a moment of tense silence, the Admiral nodded. "Proceed, Major." The bioweapon's effect exceeded even the humans' expectations. When detonated within a dense concentration of scourge vessels, the pathogens spread rapidly through their interconnected systems. The normally coordinated scourge fleet suddenly fractured into disconnected units, their movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated. Coalition forces, guided by human tacticians, struck mercilessly at the confused enemy. For the first time in the 2-year war, the scourge was in full retreat. As the battle concluded, the command center fell silent. The holographic displays showed an overwhelming coalition victory. Nearly 3/4 of the scourge force had been destroyed, with minimal coalition losses. "We won," General Castor said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "This battle," Captain Chen corrected, "not the war. Not yet." Admiral Keshra studied the humans with new appreciation and new wariness. Their methods had been effective beyond dispute, but they had also been ruthless, pragmatic, and utterly unconstrained by the ethical boundaries the Coalition had always observed. "The scourge will adapt to these tactics," Science Director Vrell warned. "They always do." "Of course they will," Commander Blackwood agreed. "That's why we're already developing the next phase of our strategy." Colonel Volkov, who had been quietly observing throughout the battle, finally spoke. "The scourge learns, but it's reactive learning. It can only adapt to what it has experienced. The key is to keep introducing elements it cannot predict." "And what is the next unpredictable element?" Admiral Keshra asked. Captain Chen exchanged glances with her fellow humans before answering. "We're going to make the scourge afraid." General Castor scoffed. "The scourge doesn't feel fear. It's a collective." "Everything that can learn can feel fear," Colonel Volkov said softly. "Fear is just the anticipation of pain or destruction. The scourge values its continued existence, or it wouldn't fight to survive. We're going to teach it that humans are to be feared above all else." Admiral Keshra felt her scales prickle with an ancient instinctive response. These humans spoke of warfare in ways her people had abandoned millennia ago, not as a necessary evil conducted according to civilized rules, but as an art form practiced with predatory joy. "Your tactics were effective, Captain," she conceded, "but I must express concern about some of the methods employed. The use of bioweapons, civilian ships as weapons platforms, these violate coalition principles." "Principles won't save your worlds, Admiral," Chen replied, not uncannily. "Results will. Today we saved the Araxis system. Tomorrow we start taking back what the scourge has stolen from you." As coalition officers celebrated their first significant victory in months, Admiral Keshra watched the humans already planning their next moves. They didn't join in the celebration, didn't take a moment to rest or reflect. They simply moved on to the next phase of their war. "You don't seem surprised by our success," she observed, approaching Captain Chen. The human looked up from a display showing the scourge's retreat vectors. "Humans expect to win, Admiral. We always have. It's one of our greatest strengths and most dangerous flaws. And if you had failed today, then we would have learned from the failure and adapted. That's another human specialty." Chen's eyes held an intensity that unsettled the Admiral. The Scourge thinks it knows adaptation, but it hasn't seen anything yet. Humans have been adapting to overcome stronger, faster predators since before we had language to describe them. As she walked away, Admiral Keshera couldn't shake the thought that in seeking salvation from one predator, the Coalition may have invited in another. But for now, they had won. For the first time in 2 years, the Scourge had been defeated. And somewhere in Coalition space, on 22 worlds facing extinction, the news would spread. The humans are here, and they know how to win. The turning point. 3 weeks after the victory at Araxis, the war had undergone a transformation that many Coalition species found difficult to comprehend. After 2 years of relentless losses, they were winning battles. The Scourge's seemingly unstoppable advance had not only been halted but reversed. The Galactic Coalition War Council convened aboard the Eternal Dawn, the mood markedly different from the despair of their previous meeting. Representatives from all 17 species gathered to hear Admiral Keshera's report on what Coalition media had begun calling the human turn. In the past 21 days, the Admiral began, Coalition forces have successfully recaptured 7 star systems previously lost to the Scourge. 42 major engagements, 39 victories. She gestured to the holographic display, where blue now pushed back against the red stain. For the first time, we have pushed the Scourge into a defensive posture. A ripple of approval moved through the council. High Minister Loreth leaned forward, his 4 eyes blinking in an optimistic pattern. These results are undeniable, Admiral. The human strategies have proven remarkably effective. He glanced toward Captain Chen, who stood at the edge of the chamber with her fellow officers. However, concerns have been raised about the nature of these strategies. Ambassador Prelna nodded her elegant avian head. Reports from the front lines describe tactics that many find disturbing. Biological weapons, psychological warfare, deliberate targeting of Scourge communication nodes even when civilian rescue would be possible instead. With respect, Ambassador, Captain Chen replied evenly. We prioritize strategic objectives that lead to victory. The faster we defeat the Scourge, the fewer civilians will ultimately be lost. That's a rather cold calculus, the ambassador observed. War is cold, Ambassador. The Scourge doesn't care about your feelings or ethical concerns. It cares about consuming your worlds. Before the discussion could escalate, Science Director Vrel interrupted with new information. I believe our human colleagues have a development to report regarding Scourge biology. Major Jackson Lai stepped forward, activating a detailed holographic model of what appeared to be a Scourge organism. Thank you, Director. As you know, we've been conducting intensive analysis of Scourge biological samples recovered during recent engagements. The model expanded, revealing intricate neural pathways glowing with electrical activity. What we've discovered is revolutionary. The Scourge Collective is not a true hive mind as previously believed. It's a network of semi-autonomous units connected by quantum-entangled particles embedded in their neural tissue. Meaning what, exactly? General Castor demanded. Meaning they have a central command structure, Lai explained. A primary intelligence that coordinates the others. Find it, neutralize it, and the rest lose cohesion. A murmur ran through the council. This was the first suggestion that the Scourge might have a vulnerability at its core. Do we know where this central intelligence is located? Admiral Keshera asked. Not yet, Lai admitted. But we've identified a pattern in the quantum signals. We believe the primary nexus must periodically synchronize with its extended nodes. During these synchronizations, we can track the signal back to its source. How do we force such a synchronization? High Minister Loreth asked. Colonel Volkov, who had been silently observing until now, stepped forward. We make the Scourge desperate enough to call home. The human psychological warfare specialist activated a different display, showing tactical simulations. The Scourge has begun adapting to our conventional battle tactics as expected. But they're still vulnerable to psychological operations. The Scourge doesn't have psychology, Ambassador Prelna objected. They're biomechanical organisms with a shared consciousness. Everything that thinks can be manipulated, Volkov countered. The scourge values efficiency. It preserves resources. It avoids unnecessary losses. These are exploitable traits. He expanded the tactical display. We've designed Operation Nemesis, a series of strikes targeting scourge resource processing centers. Not random attacks, but a sequential pattern that will appear to the scourge as if we've discovered some critical weakness in their infrastructure. Have we discovered such a weakness? General Kaztur asked hopefully. No, Volkov admitted. But we want them to think we have. The scourge will detect the pattern and assume we're exploiting a vulnerability they've missed. They'll be forced to reevaluate their entire resource management system. And this will accomplish what exactly? The ambassador pressed. Captain Chen took over the explanation. It will create uncertainty in their collective decision-making process. For the first time, the scourge will experience something analogous to fear, the fear that they've overlooked something fundamental. In that moment of collective uncertainty, Major Lai continued, they'll seek guidance from their central nexus. The quantum signals will spike as all nodes request new directives. And when that happens, we'll trace the signals to their source. Admiral Keshra finished, understanding dawning. We'll find the heart of the scourge. The plan was audacious, combining military strikes with psychological manipulation on a scale the coalition had never attempted. After intense debate, the Council approved Operation Nemesis, though several representatives registered formal protests against specific tactics proposed by the human advisors. 10 days later, coalition forces launched the first phase of Nemesis. Strike teams hit scourge processing facilities in the Vega, Proxima, and Deneb systems simultaneously. The attacks targeted specific components of the facilities with surgical precision, creating the impression of inside knowledge about critical vulnerabilities. The scourge response was immediate, and exactly as the humans had predicted. Rather than their usual adaptive counterattack, the scourge withdrew to defensive positions, seemingly reassessing their infrastructure security. They're confused, Commander Blackwood observed from the tactical center. They're trying to identify what we know that they don't. Phase 2 began 3 days later. Coalition forces struck another series of processing centers, again targeting seemingly random components, but following a pattern discernible only if one knew what to look for. The scourge response became more erratic, dividing forces to protect facilities that matched the pattern while leaving others vulnerable. They're seeing ghosts, Colonel Volkov said with grim satisfaction, questioning their own data. Exactly as planned. Throughout these operations, Major Lai's team monitored quantum signal patterns across captured scourge communication nodes. For days, the pattern showed only routine fluctuations, until the third phase of Nemesis. Coalition forces launched their most ambitious strike yet, a simultaneous attack on 7 scourge-controlled systems. The targets weren't random. They formed a specific geometric pattern when plotted on stellar maps, a pattern that appeared significant but was, in fact, meaningless. Signal spike detected, one of Lai's scientists announced. Massive increase in quantum coherence across all monitored nodes. Lai studied the readings, his expression intent. They're calling home. All of them, simultaneously. In the command center, Captain Chen turned to Admiral Keshra. Now, Admiral, while they're connected, we can trace the primary nexus. For 3 tense hours, coalition analysts worked to triangulate the source of the quantum signals. The task was complicated by the scourge's attempts to mask the transmissions, but the humans had anticipated this. Got it, Major Lai finally announced. His expression was one of grim triumph as he projected a set of coordinates onto the main display. The primary scourge nexus is located here, in the Tartarus Nebula. Admiral Keshra studied the coordinates with surprise. That's unexpected. The Tartarus Nebula is largely uninhabited. No valuable resources, no strategic planets. Why would they establish their command center there? Because it's the last place you'd look, Captain Chen suggested. And because of this, she adjusted the display to show radiation patterns. The nebula generates interference that would normally mask the quantum signals from detection. If we hadn't forced a massive synchronization event, we might never have found it. The discovery energized coalition forces. For the first time, they had a definitive target, the heart of the enemy that had nearly destroyed them. "We should assemble the fleet immediately," General Castor declared. "Every ship, every weapon. We strike at the heart of the scourge with overwhelming force." "No," Captain Chen said firmly. "That's exactly what they'll expect, and they'll be prepared for it." "What do you propose instead?" Admiral Keshra asked. "A surgical strike. Small, fast ships with specialized equipment. In and out before they can mount a full defense." "What kind of specialized equipment?" Science Director Varel inquired. Major Lai activated another display, showing a device unlike any the Coalition had seen before. "We call it Thanatos, a targeted bioquantum disruptor designed specifically to attack the primary scourge neural network." "You've been developing a superweapon without council authorization," Ambassador Prelna asked, her feathers bristling. "We've been developing a victory condition," Chen corrected. As per our original agreement, a heated debate erupted among the council members. The human proposal violated numerous coalition conventions on ethical warfare, yet their methods had consistently produced results when conventional approaches had failed. "Enough," Admiral Keshra finally declared. "The objective is clear. We must neutralize the scourge central nexus. The only question is how. My Special Forces team can deliver the Thanatos device," Commander Blackwood offered. "We'll need a small escort fleet as diversion, but our stealth insertion vessels can penetrate the nebula defenses." "This mission has a high probability of failure," Science Director Varel warned. "The Tartarus Nebula is notoriously hazardous to navigation, and we must assume the scourge will protect its central nexus with its strongest forces. High risk, high reward," Chen replied simply. "That's the human way." After further deliberation, the Council approved a modified version of the human plan. A small coalition battle group would create a diversion at the edge of the Tartarus Nebula, while Commander Blackwood's Special Forces team infiltrated to deliver the weapon. Preparations moved swiftly. The human specialists worked alongside coalition engineers to modify a squadron of fast attack vessels for the mission. The Thanatos device, still not fully explained to coalition scientists, was loaded aboard Commander Blackwood's lead ship. 2 days before the mission launch, Admiral Keshra found Captain Chen alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. "Your plan is in motion, Captain," the Admiral said, joining her at the viewport. "Soon we may see the end of the scourge threat." Chen nodded but didn't look away from the stars. "If we succeed." "You don't sound as confident as usual." "Confidence is for press conferences, Admiral. Reality requires caution." The Admiral studied this human who had changed the course of a war that had seemed unwinnable. "You've never told me why Earth decided to help us." "The truth, not the diplomatic answer." Chen was silent for a long moment. "Humans have a saying, 'The enemy of my enemy is my friend.' We've been watching the scourge for longer than you realize. They passed through our region of space before they reached yours." "What?" Admiral Keshra's scales rippled with shock. "You encountered the scourge before us." "Not directly. They skirted the edge of our territory. We observed them consuming an uninhabited system. We recognized the threat immediately and began preparing." "Why didn't you warn us?" Chen finally turned from the viewport, her expression unreadable. "By the time we confirmed what we were dealing with, they had already engaged your forces. We needed time to develop countermeasures, to study them. We used your battles as data points. You watched us die," Admiral Keshra said, her voice cold. "We watched and learned, so that we could save those who remained," Chen corrected. "War requires sacrifice, Admiral. You're learning that now." Before the Admiral could respond, Commander Blackwood arrived with urgent news. "Captain, we've detected unusual scourge fleet movements. They're consolidating forces around the Tartarus Nebula. Chen's expression hardened. They know we're coming. Impossible, the Admiral objected. The mission plans are classified at the highest level. The how doesn't matter right now, Chen said sharply. What matters is adaptation. We changed the plan. Over the next hours, the human officers completely restructured the mission. Instead of waiting for the scheduled launch, the strike force would depart immediately. Instead of the planned diversion at the nebula's edge, they would use a series of automated drones to simulate an attack from an entirely different vector. This is reckless, Science Director Vrel protested. The preparations aren't complete. The navigational data for the nebula hasn't been fully processed. The Scourge knows our original plan, Commander Blackwood replied. Incomplete preparations are better than walking into an ambush. Despite continued objections, the modified mission launched 18 hours ahead of schedule. Commander Blackwood led a force of 7 ships, 4 coalition vessels, and 3 human-designed stealth craft toward the Tartarus Nebula. The diversion worked better than expected. The Scourge committed significant forces to intercept the drone-simulated attack, creating the gap in their defensive screen. Blackwood's team slipped through, entering the swirling gases of the nebula. For 6 hours, Coalition Command lost contact with the strike force. The nebula's radiation interfered with communications, leaving them blind to the mission's progress. All they could do was monitor the Scourge fleet movements and hope. When communications finally returned, it was a single broken transmission from Commander Blackwood. Device deployed. Heavy resistance. Primary nexus confirmed. Casualties. Signal disruption imminent. Then silence. For 12 agonizing hours, there was no further word from the strike team. The Scourge forces around the nebula showed no unusual activity, continuing their defensive patterns as if nothing had happened. It failed, General Castor concluded glumly. The weapon didn't work. We don't know that, Captain Chen insisted, though even her confidence seemed shaken. On the 13th hour, everything changed. Across Coalition space, monitoring stations reported the same phenomenon. Scourge ships suddenly stopping, their energy signatures fluctuating wildly. Some simply powered down, drifting in space. Others began moving in erratic, uncoordinated patterns, occasionally firing weapons at nothing. What's happening? Admiral Keshra demanded. Major Lai studied the incoming data, his expression shifting from confusion to elation. The Thanatos device. It worked. It's disrupting the quantum links between the Nexus and the extended nodes. The Scourge is dying. Ambassador Prelna asked incredulously. Not dying, Captain Chen corrected. Fragmenting. Without the central Nexus to coordinate them, the individual units are reverting to autonomous function. They still exist, but they're no longer a collective intelligence. As reports continued to pour in from across Coalition space, the truth became undeniable. The Scourge, as a unified threat, had been neutralized. Individual units remained dangerous, but without central coordination, they could be contained and eliminated systematically. 3 days later, a single ship emerged from the Tartarus Nebula, one of Commander Blackwood's stealth vessels, heavily damaged but still operational. Of the original strike force, it was the only survivor. Commander Blackwood herself was among the casualties, having remained behind with a skeleton crew to ensure the Thanatos device was properly activated after the rest of her team evacuated. Her last message, reported the surviving human officer, a lieutenant with severe burns covering half his face, was tell them we kept our promise. A memorial service was held aboard the Eternal Dawn for those lost in the mission. Coalition species and humans stood side by side, honoring warriors who had changed the course of history. Admiral Keshra found herself standing next to Captain Chen during the ceremony. Your people paid a heavy price for our victory, the Admiral observed quietly. We knew the cost going in, Chen replied. So did they. The Coalition Council has voted unanimously to offer Earth formal membership, Admiral Keshra said, with special recognition of humanity's role in defeating the Scourge. Chen's expression remained neutral. "And how do you feel about that, Admiral? After learning how we used your early battles as data points, after seeing our methods." The Admiral considered the question carefully. "I think," she said finally, "that the galaxy is a dangerous place, perhaps more dangerous than my people have wanted to believe. Perhaps we need allies who understand that danger better than we do, even if those allies sometimes frighten you." "Especially then," Admiral Keshra admitted. "The Scourge taught us that peace is not guaranteed. Your people taught us that survival sometimes requires methods we find uncomfortable." As the ceremony concluded, news arrived from Coalition scout ships, the first images from inside the Tartarus Nebula, showing the remains of the Scourge central nexus. It was a massive structure, part biological, part mechanical, now shattered and lifeless. "Hard to believe it's really over," Science Director Vrul remarked, studying the images. "The immediate threat is over," Captain Chen corrected. "The war is won. But the Scourge came from somewhere. They evolved for a purpose. Understanding that purpose is our next mission." Admiral Keshra looked at the human captain with new understanding. Humanity hadn't just come to fight a war. They had come to prepare for the next one. "Your people don't really know how to live in peace, do you?" she asked, not unkindly. "We know how," Chen replied. "We just never forget how to fight. In our history, those who forget don't survive long." As Coalition worlds began the process of recovery, celebrating their unexpected salvation, Admiral Keshra couldn't help but wonder if they had exchanged one existential question for another. The Scourge had asked, "Can our civilization survive?" The humans now posed a different question. What price are we willing to pay for that survival? The answer, like humanity itself, was both reassuring and disturbing.